Thanks, Adam, for your time. Together with Rabo, I'm investigating the state of the Dutch startup ecosystem. There's a lot of stuff going on with Startup Delta and Startup Fest, but we wanted to take a look and talk to people that are actually part of the ecosystem and ask them how they see the future. I'm going to ask you 5 questions about 5 different topics, but first I'd like to ask you to shortly introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Thanks very much, Bram. My name is Adam Anders. I'm the managing partner of Antera Capital. Antera is a venture capital fund focused solely on food and agriculture innovative companies, basically any company that's transforming the way we produce, move, and consume food. We kicked off inside Rabobank, actually incubated by Rabobank, and then a little bit more than 2 years ago, we became an independent fund backed by Rabobank and Fidelity out of Boston.
Great, thanks. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting to talk to you because, you know, when people talk about startups, it's mostly web tech based. But since you're in the food and agriculture sector, I think it's really interesting to hear about your answers to this. So basically, we're going to talk about 5 topics. The first one is starting a startup. So my question is, how have you seen the Dutch startup ecosystem change? And what do you think of the future with regards to actually starting a company, starting a startup?
Look, I would say that for a startup in the food and tech sector, first of all, it's a brand new venture capital sector. So globally, there's an issue with the fact that there's not a great track record or set of examples of experienced food and ag tech entrepreneurs. It's one of the Achilles heels. It is the Achilles heel for our sector because the magnitude of the change that demographics suggest and macroeconomics suggest we need, or in consumer tastes suggest we need, clearly underlies the fact that there's a big opportunity. But it's an area where venture capital hasn't played. Until 3 years ago, globally, it was sub 300 million. Now, that's changed. And with that change, America has moved first, as it normally does, and Europe is a bit behind. And the Netherlands is not different from Europe in the sense that that entrepreneurial spirit in food and ag tech, it's at its infant days in Europe and the Netherlands.
And have you seen that move beyond, you know, a big hotspot is obviously Wageningen, where they've done a lot of research and the universities there, obviously, like, have you seen this move up to like the northern parts or, you know, is there a certain part of the Netherlands that's involved in this sector, or would you say it's widely spread?
Well, let's distinguish here. If we're talking about where the hub of innovation is in food and agriculture, let's distinguish here between the Netherlands' phenomenal role as being an innovation and efficiency leader in the food and agriculture sector, and how many of those ideas and core skills, attributes, areas of excellence are resulting in startups and entrepreneurs. So the Netherlands is a world leader in sectors like vegetable seed production and development, in greenhouse, in dairy, and in piggeries. It's also the second largest producer and exporter of food in the world. And so unequivocally, you're a market leader in innovation, and certainly Wageningen and other universities and technical institutes and research institutes are a part of that cluster. What hasn't happened yet is that hasn't resulted in a string of venture capital-backed or even entrepreneur-backed ideas. And so that is a new area of focus for our sector globally. And clearly the Netherlands has a phenomenal set of skills to be a leader in that space as it emerges as a venture capital and entrepreneur-led sector.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. How do you see that change towards the future now that there's venture capital active in the sector? Will it become easier to actually start a company?
Yeah, it's definitely going to become easier to start a company. But I think if you wanted to roadmap it, I would look at what's happened in other sectors where transformative change occurred. And therefore, I would say let's not just inside food and ag. So clearly the Netherlands is a leader in these sectors we just mentioned and a global leader in food and ag. But when the telecommunications sector changed, when companies like Skype and WhatsApp came along, they weren't traditional telecommunications companies using traditional telecommunications tech, right?
Yep.
It's the same in financial services with Square and Adyen, the same in human health and life sciences. And we're seeing it in clean tech with the likes of Tesla or Vestas. They're not the traditional energy companies. Food and agriculture is going to be the same. It's going to address issues, but it's going to draw on the skills that come out of other sectors. It's draw on the technologies that have come out of software, that have come out of big data management, that have come out of life sciences, that have come out of material sciences. And then they're going to apply those innovations to the food and ag tech sector, the food and agriculture sector, to create winning companies that just think differently about the problems faced by the food and agriculture value chain.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's a great answer. So when we, move on from actually starting a company, how that's going to evolve, how have you seen these companies attract talent? A lot of web tech stuff is going on, in the west of the Netherlands, where there's a big war on talent, so to say. Is that different in this sector, or how are these companies working with talent and attracting them?
So when we talk about attracting talent to the food and ag tech sector and the competition for talent, it is a little different from other venture capital sectors, because when you have the beginning of a venture capital backed sector, you can't take, it's not a matter of competition for traditional winners, for the second time entrepreneurs, for the junior employees that were there watching the previous winning company evolve. So in part, we have to take a fine line between taking people out of traditional food and ag, larger corporates and medium-sized corporates, but also to infuse that venture capital approach, that high growth environment, that transformative change mentality. We have to borrow from other sectors. So we have to recruit people from life sciences or from other big data driven companies and software companies, or from the clean tech sectors.
Okay, and how would you see that evolve in the coming years, when there's going to be more companies in this sector, obviously more companies that are going to get coverage, etc. Like, people are going to learn that there's actually a possibility to join a new like startups in this sector. Will that become easier for them?
Look, I think it's certainly going to become easier. I think it's going to become easier for three obvious reasons for me. One, they're very big issues, and the chain is very inefficient, so people are going to gravitate towards solving those big problems. Second, it's a fantastic feel-good solving a big issue in the food and agriculture value chain. It has a brilliant impact. It gives me a lot of joy to talk about my work, and I think entrepreneurs who enter this sector get that similar extra drive. And third of all, these companies, when they solve a problem, are very valuable, and entrepreneurs love going where value is created, as does venture capital. So, we nearly had our first unicorn in ag tech with Climate Corporation selling for some $960 million. Less than 6-year-old company, less than 30 million of revenue, nearly $1 billion valuation. Entrepreneurs globally really notice that. And so we're going to see entrepreneurs from all sectors coming in, and then we're going to see second-time entrepreneurs that know a little bit more about the sector and its nuances in about 3 to 4 years' time.
Okay, that's interesting to see that, like you mentioned, it's perhaps a couple of years behind the web tech sector, where there are second-time founders or founders that have exited that fund new companies. So the sector as a whole keeps growing. I think that's a nice transition to the next topic, which is getting funding. You're obviously active in this space. I think you have some competitors too. How have you seen that change, and why did this fund start? Like, what's the biggest opportunity you see, and how is that going to change in the future?
So the biggest opportunity was the biggest opportunity in food and ag tech is that no one was funding this change except for the traditional funding from big corporate or the research institute dollars, but no entrepreneurial or venture capital dollars. And yet the opportunity was enormous and the magnitude of the problem was enormous. What we have seen is that since 2012, 2013, when previously there was practically no money allocated to the sector for the last 30 years, maximum, say, 400 million globally, we've seen it step up to 800 million, then 2.6 billion, and then last year 4.6 billion. So the capital has arrived. Still very small as a percentage of global contribution to GDP of food and ag, but investors are paying attention. So I think what's interesting is a lot of that has come from the generalist VCs that have traditionally operated in other sectors. We think that food and ag has got enough complexities and nuances that actually having a dedicated fund solely focused on this sector is going to help those young companies, and it's going to help the generalist VCs that have stepped in be more effective. And so we're leveraging our connection with Rabobank and our nearly 7 years of focus on building relationships with the food and ag corporates.
Okay, so when I think of food and ag like as a sector, I'm assuming, but I hope you can tell me that moving beyond the Netherlands is very important. As you mentioned, these are big issues and they could benefit a lot of people. How do you see startups moving beyond the Netherlands, or are these companies already starting with an international focus? And does that funding that's getting into this sector now help them? How have you seen that change?
Sure. So if we talk about the international aspect of food and agriculture, venture capital, I think that the fact that young food and ag tech companies have to go global young is one of the reasons, one of the top 4 reasons why the sector traditionally has not had a lot of venture capital support. For example, a plant breeding or innovation has to chase one summer a year in Europe, or can do 2 seasons a year if it can also operate in the Southern Hemisphere. So that's a very young company operating in 2 hemispheres practically from day one. Also, these commodity markets now have become global marketplaces. So young ag and food tech companies find themselves going global at a much earlier stage, and often with requiring boots on the ground in the soil in a different hemisphere or a different country. And so we therefore think it's critical that Dutch startups in the food and ag tech space have access to this international network, and that's why as a dedicated food and ag tech fund, we try to make connections into these other regions. I think a second place where Dutch food and ag tech companies are going to go across borders at an early stage is it's a general trend in venture capital, and that is in America we have an environment where there's a single currency, often a relatively simple single regulatory environment, and a large marketplace, and larger corporates, and a community that's quite open to winning by innovation and working with small companies. And so we do see that innovative companies out of the Netherlands are going to find themselves setting up operations fairly early in their pathway to success in America. And we're helping 3 of our 5 portfolio companies at the moment open their US offices.
Okay, and how do you see that change towards the future? Even more maybe when it becomes easier with a bigger network, like from the VCs. How would you see that change in the future?
Look, I think in the future, European ag tech market will become the second or third priority for these companies as they mature and as they get past addressing the large single economy US opportunity. I think we'll also see Europe has a clear competitive advantage in certain sectors. And so we want to be able to bring the best ideas to Europe, and in particular to the Netherlands, where they should be based. It is the best tech hub for the food and ag tech space in Europe. And we'll also see our companies that are have their base in the Netherlands, have set up in the US, then looking to Asia, South America, or back to other European markets as they mature.
Okay, and you just touched briefly on the subject of regulations. As you mentioned, in the States, there's much more like a general legislation throughout the country. But when you have to move beyond the Dutch borders in an earlier stage of your company, you obviously get involved with different types of regulations in these other countries. How have you seen that evolve, like in the Netherlands, but also when they are moving beyond these borders? Are they able to actually scale beyond the Netherlands with regards to like the regulation? How has that changed?
I think so. The question relates to regulation and the difference between, say, Dutch regulation in the food and ag tech space and other markets. Clearly, when you have a large single market like the US, one currency, and a fairly standard regulatory environment between states, that's an attractive place to launch your business and scale quickly for a young food or ag tech company. I think young Dutch companies can make that transition fairly easily. I think US-based companies trying to think about how to tackle Europe find it very threatening. They look at the multiple currencies, multiple languages, and multiple regulatory environments and don't know where to start. And I think that's an important role for Antera to play. As the largest food and ag tech fund in Europe, to help those companies find the confidence as to where to base themselves and how to address this opportunity.
And once this sector evolves, how would you see that change in the future? Will it also become easier for them? Same with funding, if the sector gets bigger, also with the legislation, governments will become, more open to innovation in this space. Have you seen that change already, or is that in motion now?
Yeah, I think that change is in motion now. I think some of it is regulatory-led, as in governments realising that allowing the next generation of food or ag tech companies or biologically or environmentally safe ag inputs to be approved quickly and rolled out quickly requires some change to existing regulation. I also think some of the big social issues, like the use of antibiotics in the animal rearing production process, and the threat that poses for human health, it's going to mean that regulation is going to move quickly. And I think Europe has some advantages here because with their traditionally more, so we say, environmentally sympathetic policies, it means that the research institutes are ahead in some of these areas and the regulatory environment is ahead in some of these circumstances. I think the challenge for Europe is to remain ahead because America is brilliant at moving quickly when a strong positive trend is available. So we've got both a general political environment that's positive for agtech, a fundamental demographic and economic need for change, and I think consumers are ready for change in the food value chain and are going to ask for some differences in how the sector is regulated.
Sounds like some exciting times coming up. I want to thank you for your answers and hope to see you soon and good luck with everything you do.
Thanks very much, Bram.
Thanks.